Okay, today we're going to talk about the Hellenistic period in ancient numismatics. This is basically about coins minted, issued between 330 and 30 BC. And I'd like to give a little title to this period, and I call it Idealism versus Realism. And you will soon see what I mean by that. Okay. Oh, the animation doesn't work again.
Oh, no.
Anyways, okay. Well, we will just do whatever we can. So this Hellenistic period begins in 330 BC with the final victory of Alexander the Great, or Darius III of the Persian Empire, and it ends with the Battle of Actium in 31 BC. This is purely from a numismatic perspective, and in my belief, it makes sense. Other historians start the Hellenistic period earlier, from the 4th century BC. However, even 400 BC, I should say, and then they go all the way to the Roman period. However, we cannot really talk about a Hellenistic nature of history before the achievements of Alexander the Great. That's why the numismatic designation is more correct than other designations. The ambitious campaigns of Philip of Macedon started everything, actually. Alexander simply received a well-cooked meal, and then he simply continued with what his father started. And his father drew the path and set off to achieve his goals. He achieved most of his goals, but he exhausted his resources, and maybe he was going to regain those resources, but he died. And then Alexander simply took over. He was young. It was not expected that he would do a great job, but he had good teachers, he had good education, and his father set good examples. So the path to success was well founded, and he was ready to do a good job. One particular aspect of this period is interesting to me, at least. During this period, the city-states, after, in the middle of this period, I should say, city-states begin to give way to a more global culture, and the entire Mediterranean Sea and the Middle East flourish in a background of conflict, commerce, and cross-cultural influence, with the Macedonian imperial ideals and the Greek language dominating the scene. So this is what makes this period interesting, and this is why mostly we call it the Hellenistic period. The coinage in this period, I call them dull. However, they are interesting all the same, because we numismatists and history buffs enjoy making things interesting, and this is not by force. Of course, there are a lot of interesting things to see and enjoy and learn from on the coins of this period. The main topic simply shifts from individual city propaganda to individual king and queen propaganda. that's why all versions of the coins in this period simply are dominated by kings and queens, and sometimes certain deities that are the attributes of those kings and queens. So mostly Zeus, Athena, Poseidon, and Heracles, Perseus. Why do they not have Dionysus, for instance, mostly? Because they are all warlike kings. They all fight, and they all pursue a goal. That's why they have to have the support of the top gods and deities, and the top gods and heroes, Zeus, Athena, Poseidon, Hercules, were important to them, and that's why they had them on their coins. And on the reverses, again, we see these deities and their attributes. Otto Markham, the author of early Hellenistic period coins, claims that most of these reverse types were derived from statues, which I partly agree with, because you wouldn't have statues of all these gods and goddesses, and the imagination and skills of ancient coin die engravers were vast enough to create these images for coinage. One thing that I wanted to mention here is that, on the reverse of Alexander the Great, for instance, you always have the seated Zeus. What makes these series interesting is the side figures. What you see right next to the figure of Zeus, or under the throne, or above the eagle, and the same is true for Lysimachus coins and all the others. During this period, the idealism of classical art gave way to a more realistic way of expressing the human figure. To publicize the kings and queens, sometimes their extraordinary likenesses are reflected on their coinage. Here's the coin of Seleucus. Well, it's a coin of Antiochus I, but this is something that he minted to commemorate his father, Seleucus I. But you look at the likeness reflected on the coin. And Demetrius I, son of Antigonus, Antiochus III, Ptolemy I. So as you see, they're all very similar to their likenesses as far as we can see on their statues and sculptures. Yet at the same time, in the 2nd century BC, we see a return to idealism. Certain kings and queens were idealized on their coin images. And I have 2 examples here. Cleopatra VII with Alexander Palace, and here this is another figure. You can see the difference between the 2 rendition of the queen. And here I just wanted to give this example of Mithridates II. On the left is the idealized rendition of his bust, and on the right, who knows, maybe he had a big nose like this. Why is it called Hellenistic period? Purely because Greek was the lingua franca. And here is a coin of Alexander the Great minted in Babylon. I bet you wouldn't find a second person other than Alexander's soldiers who spoke Greek at that time. It was just a foreign land, and nobody really spoke Greek at that time. But starting with Alexander the Great, most of these cities started to use the Greek language on their coinage. Here is an example from Bactria, another one from Parthia, another one from Cappadocia, Pontus, Armenia. Even in Egypt, nobody knew Greek other than the Macedonian ruling class and their close associates. So how correct is it to call it the Hellenistic period? It is something that certain scholars established a couple hundred years ago, and we still continue using that. I don't see anything wrong with that, but we have to understand that it's not correct to assume that Hellen culture or Greek culture and traditions dominated the world during that so-called Hellenistic period. We have to keep that in mind. And here is an interesting example of the Celtic approach. They simply imitated the Western coinage at that time, but for them, the language was not really important, and they didn't know the language. And it's obvious that they didn't know the language. This is how they conceived the legend on the coins. They also minted similar coins with more words maybe or letters, but they don't mean anything. They simply tried to imitate what they saw, and this is what most of the people in these lands thought about these coins when they saw them. There are some innovations in coin making and art and philosophy in this period. The tetradrachms of the Attic standard were common currency, of course, replacing the famous Athenian alls. I think one of the biggest achievements of Alexander the Great is taking the playground, financial playground, over from the Athenian alls. Many regions minted coins in their weight standards at that time. Egypt, Rhodes, Phoenicia, they were lighter coins, but the tetradrachm dominated the scene, albeit somewhat losing its weight in time. It started as a nice size, 25, 26 millimeter size silver coin at around 17.20 grams. And in time, it started to become lighter, yet its size started to grow bigger. And by the time we get to the 2nd century BC, the size became 35 to 40 millimeters diameter, but the weight is around 16, if not 15 plus. Never 17.20 after the first 20, 30 years. In this period, for the first time, female sovereigns appear on obverses, and some kings start to claim godhood, and they are depicted radiate, and we see serrated coins in this period, then central depressions begin in this period. So we don't see these central depressions on silver coins or gold coins, of course. But minting of bronze coins always proved to be more challenging than silver and gold, of course. And they wanted to, they tried to find a way to keep the flen between the dies during striking. So the central depression is as a result of little spikes or nails attached to in the middle of the dies. And recently I came across this coin. As you can see, the nail remained within the coin. So it broke off during the strike, and it is still there. So there's no mystery there. The idea was to keep the flen between the dies. And another interesting aspect of this period is that the Pergamon Kingdom started a tradition using the same design with different variations and using these coins in a large area. It's like euro of its time. I have 3 examples here from Pergamon, Ephesus, and Sardis, but actually these coins were minted in over 10 cities and were used within Western Anatolia for quite a long time. The series were so famous and so much welcome that they continued to be minted during the Roman period, all the way to the time of Hadrian, Antoninus Pius, and so on. And it is called the closed monetary system. They are lighter, they are still called tetradrachms, but they are at least 2 grams lighter than the original tetradrachms. One of the interesting aspects of this period is that for the first time, we see certain titles appear on coins. So Alexander, when he first started, it was just Alexandru, his name. Then some mints wanted to add Basileus, king, to that, and that was it. And this continued the same way during his lifetime and the first 30 years after his achievements in the East. However, starting with Antiochus IV, kings started to add their adopted titles to their coins. Here, Antiochus IV says, Basileus Antiochos Theo Epiphanos Nikephoros. So King Antiochus, God manifest and victorious. Ariarathes, he is affable, pious. And Arsinoe, she is Philadelphia. And Mithridates, he is Eupatoros. Ariarathes here, Philopotoros, he's father-loving. And Demetrius here, Soteros, savior. These titles were adopted by many different kings. These were not specific to these kings and queens only. And some of them had political titles. Look at this one. Ariobarzanes has Pila Romaio, so a friend of Rome. And Mithridates the first here says Helenos, Helen loving. So he wants to enjoy his friendship with the Greek neighbors. And I like this one the best among all the others. He is Evergetos, benefactor. So he was a good guy. He was helping other people, and supporting the poor, giving jobs to jobless people. No, actually, it's just a joke. But whatever the reason, he adopted benefactor title for. There are several other kings that adopted that title. It's just pure propaganda, I believe. So I just wanted to show this before starting with Alexander. As I said, Alexander was lucky to have a father like Philip, who paved the way to a great kingdom and achievement for Alexander. So, and Alexander changed only one thing when he succeeded his father: the weight of his tetrahedron. So, and Philip simply introduced some military innovations during his time, which actually proved to be very effective. And his new army called phalanx was a very highly trained group of soldiers. They worked in unison, and this is something that Romans actually adopted later. And the only difference is that the soldiers carried long spears, about 4 meters in length, to keep the enemy away from them, so that they can still disturb the enemy lines before they engage in close combat. But the main idea is to have a body of soldiers acting in unison and disturbing the order of the attack of the enemy, and then engaging in close combat. So this is something that Philip developed, and Alexander simply picked up and continued with that. The availability of metal of the need for payments to be made in coin are of paramount importance in any attempt to decide when and where coins were minted. So this is a statement that I wanted to emphasize. Many historians approach this in a sentimental way. Oh, Alexander was so great, he minted a lot of coins. Not really. Without the economics, without the financial needs and dynamics, you cannot mint coins. Otherwise, everyone would mint coins. I do mint coins from clay, for instance. I can afford it, but I cannot afford anything else. So according to the historians, contemporary historians, and Roman period historians, Alexander inherited in the summer of 336 BC some huge debts from his father, about 500 talents, talentons, I should say, the Greek word. Against these, he had only 60 talents in the treasury, and some gold and silver vessels, and he had to borrow some more money to run the country. And his expeditions in the Balkans at the beginning of his reign brought in substantial financial gains. Thebes provided 440 talents of silver, and he took over 100 talents from the Thessalians that was owed to Thebes at that time. By spring of 334, his debts fell from 1,300 talents to 200 talents. And in the treasury, he only had 70 talents. Otto Markholm and several other historians don't believe in that. They say Alexander had very rich gold and silver mines at his disposal, and he didn't need any extra money. And I humbly and strongly disagree with that. If you had so much money, you wouldn't bother to fight. You wouldn't attack your neighbors. You wouldn't start campaigns in far away lands. The main reason behind any armed conflict is money. And without money, no one is going to fight. No one is going to fight for you either. Anyways, again, I continue with the information the ancient writers provided. When he captured Sardis in 334 BC in Western Anatolia, the capital of Lydia, he got some substantial amount of treasure in the Persian treasury. They don't know how much, but they believe that it was quite substantial. When he came down to the south, Aspendos first said that they would surrender, and then they gave up, and then they decided to surrender again, but Alexander got pissed off, and he said he first fined them to pay 50 talents, and then he pissed off and says 100 talents. And the Soli in Cilicia had to pay 200 talents. In Damascus, he seized 2,600 talents of coin money. And at Memphis, Mazakas gave Alexander 800 talents. After the Battle of Gaugamela, he got 4,000 talents. And he got some treasure at Babylon, and he got some other treasure at Susa. Finally, the main treasury of the Persian Empire at Persepolis, he got 120,000 talents of silver. So again, 1 talent was approximately 26 kilograms. And here is the final number that he seized at Persepolis, 3,120,000 kilograms. So you can do the math to see how many thousands, hundreds of thousands of tetradrachms he could mint with all this money. So no one can really say that Alexander was just ambitious and he wanted to spread the Hellenic culture to the world. It was money that drew him and his army all the way to India, no matter how reluctant the army was after Persepolis, of course. So, having achieved all this, he had to reorganize the whole administration of this geography, the vast geography that he occupied. He needed to have a standardized system to finance the new state. But more importantly, to collect taxes and tribute. And he needed to figure out how he would pay his soldiers and mercenaries, and then, of course, to facilitate daily local transactions. During this time, it was not Alexander's standard coinage circulated, but quite a few different types and coins in different weights continue to circulate, because certain areas, especially where commerce is very common and commercially very active, they were used to using certain denomination of coins. They wouldn't want to work with your new denomination. So Alexander was flexible. He simply let certain governors to continue striking coins in the weight system that they that region is used to minting. Here is a map that shows the mints of Alexander the Great. During his lifetime, there seemed to be 26 mints issuing coins in the name of Alexander the Great. But after his death, the number, of course, grew. That doesn't necessarily mean that these mints at the beginning continued striking coins. Many of them simply disappeared and new ones were established. And this was a dynamic experience rather than a static experience. Coins, you had to have the means to produce coins, and you had to have a market to circulate the coins. And when you lose your market, there's no need to mint coinage anymore. So this is, we have to think outside the box when it comes to thinking of coin minting. And the ratio between gold and silver, ideally, from the accession of Alexander the Great until 310 was 1 to 10. So, but this was only possible thanks to the huge treasure the Alexandrian Empire captured from the Persians. There was enough silver and there was enough gold, and nobody needed to tamper with the ratio. That's why it could be maintained for about 25, 30 years. But as soon as new kingdoms start to appear, the money is dispersed and divided, and the inflation begins. Actually, inflation begins together with Alexander's campaigns and inheriting so much silver, because during the time of Philip II, his father, he used lower weight tetradrachms, and larger bills usually look interesting, and some people feel that they are the sign of wealth. However, economists believe that larger bills are only required when there is a big need for financing economic activities. So larger denomination coins at the beginning meant Alexander's incredible success, of course, but eventually it meant higher inflation. Now you can go back to Athenian ols. Of course, you can ask, hey, what do you think about that 17.20 grams Athenian tetradrachms? Athenian tetradrachms were commercial items. Thanks to the rich silver mines in Attica, they were able to produce so much silver that they used them as an export item. It was not an economic achievement of the Athenian administrators. It was a commercial item for them, and they simply set a certain standard, and they exported the silver that they extracted from the mines, and that's why more more Athenian treasures, hoards are found in different parts of the world than in Greece or near Athens. You can hardly see any substantial hoards found in Greece, yet you see a lot of hoards found in southern Anatolia and Syria and further east and Egypt. So it was a commercial item. They were exporting silver in the form of tetradrachms. So did the early Thracian or Macedonian tribes and kings in the early 4th century BC. Alexander continued the gold standard that his father established, and he minted a lot of coins in gold. They're all the same. They all have the head of helmeted Athena, and on the obverse and on the reverse, he has a Nike standing holding a mast. Now, nobody so far is able to explain why Nike here holds a mast, a stylus, in another word. Alexander was not a naval commander. He hardly had any naval achievements. Otto Markham and Martin Price cannot really provide any logical reason why this Nike is holding a mast in his hand. Maybe it's a pure stylistic preference of the die engravers, which I doubt. They should have a message, but it's anyone's guess, I guess, why Nike carries something like that in her hand. In the other hand, of course, she has a wreath, and of course, it represents victory that she brings to the owner of the coin, who is Alexander, of course, as the legend always indicates on the right-hand side. And what makes these series interesting is the side object here, a ram's head. Here, 4-part of conjoined horses. And here you have some monograms. Here you have a satyr's head. It's really interesting. Look at this one. And the satyr is looking up. And here you have an amphora, a tripod, and a griffin here, and then an end and a star here, and then you have a Kerykeion or Caduceus, and here you have an eagle, and you have ram's head wearing headdress of Isis. And he also minted smaller denomination gold coins. The design of Alexander tetradrachms have been an item of debate among historians and numismatists. Some early researchers believe that it was designed in Amphipolis and in Macedon, and it spread to the rest of the Alexandrian Empire. However, I believe they were not aware of the other designs, other similar designs that precede the Alexander reverses. In recent years, more and more scholars tend to believe that the Hercules or Heracles in lion skin head and Zeus enthroned holding an eagle type was created at Tarsus. So this must be after Alexander arrived in Tarsus in late 333, if not 332. And even these coins might have been designed a couple years later, not exactly when he arrived at Tarsus. These staters, around 11 grams, were so famous in the last almost 40, 50 years in Cilicia. And they were very well known and respected, and it is, the similarities are staggering. Here the Baal is seated on a backless throne, holding an eagle, an ear of grain, and some grapes. And look at the design of the throne. Look at the design of the, here it is a scepter. And look at the design of the feet and the stool that the feet are standing on. Everything is so similar, if not the exact same. And look at the drapery, how it is falling from the waist, and the way it is rolling around the feet. Everything is an exact copy of the design. The only difference is Baal is facing, even though his body is turned to left, he's facing, and Zeus is simply facing to the left. And of course, the corn ear and the grapes are gone, and Zeus is only holding the eagle. It is because in the mythology of Baal and Zeus are a little different. Baal dominated the sky and the afterlife, and also he was a fertility god, and he also dominated the welfare of people, an attribute of Dionysus in his hand. So, as I said, more and more scholars now accept the fact that the famous Alexandrian types were designed in southern Anatolia, most likely in Tarsus, after his arrival and after his defeat of the Persian king near Issus. And of course, this type was quickly embraced in the vast realm of Alexander the Great, and the same type appears on all the coins that Alexander minted at that time. Again, we only, based on the side figures, we can attribute these coins to certain mints. But as I explained at the beginning of my conversation with some of you, it is really difficult to attribute some of these coins to any mint because the side designs or monograms are so vague, and so it's really difficult to know where they were minted. I think it was not really important to anyone where they were minted at some point, even though at the beginning it was, it must have been important because they used their long time, well-known symbols on the field, but others simply didn't care. And as I said, certain mints tried to add the king title, Basileus. Mariandros and Tarsus did that, and apparently that was not favored, and they abandoned that practice shortly after. After a long time, I should say, Alexander decided to issue these large denomination coins. When I say after a long time, Athenian Decadrachms and Syracusan Decadrachms and some other Macedonian Decadrachms. This is purely for commercial reasons, in my view. They are not medallions that kings minted to gift certain generals or envoys or kings and other important people. They were not very common, so they were not minted in vast numbers, for obvious reasons, because they were too valuable. However, they were not extremely rare either. The reason why we see so few of them right now is because mostly they were simply recycled. Many of them were too large for people who possess them, and you sometimes see they are cut into 3-4 pieces, and they continue to circulate. So that tells us that it was not convenient to spend these coins. That's why they were consumed in different ways. Historically, and from a numismatic perspective, these decadrachms are interesting. They are believed to have been minted in Taxila in the east. I don't think it was a well-established mint, and maybe it was just a traveling mint. The fame Alexander achieved at that time was so huge, he didn't really need to add his full name. And on the obverse, you see an X, Greek X, and on the reverse, you see which we tend to believe that it is B stands for Basileus and A stands for Alexander. So it's quite likely that these large coins were minted in the name of Alexander the Great, even though the figures are very different from those of we know about Alexander. But they are extremely interesting to study. Now, after Alexander died, Ptolemy, one of his closest bodyguards and friend, if not a brother, designed a coin with obviously head of Alexander clad in lion skin, and they were very well known. But this one he designed clad with an elephant skin. For many years, everybody thought that it was Ptolemy that designed that coin for the first time until this gold coin appeared some years ago. I say some years ago because this coin must have been found in the early 1990s, together with an extraordinarily huge treasure. I have here some links to certain websites that you can go and further read. This Mir Zaka in Afghanistan was a well at that time, and they first found a huge hoard in 1947. Look at the numbers, staggering numbers of coins. But the second hoard is even more staggering. It is said that the hoard was found in 1992. There were 550,000 pieces, together with 350 kilogram gold and silver objects. And they say that it was about 4 tons of precious metal that was found. And according to legend, I should say, 3 tons of coins from the second deposit were smuggled by private aircraft to London and then taken to Boulogne and on to Basel, Basel in Switzerland in 1995. And the story is that some of that treasure still lies in the storage rooms of certain customs offices in Switzerland. But back to our topic, numismatically, we see that the design is earlier than, most likely earlier than the Ptolemy elephant skin head of Hercules. And this also tells us that actually what was depicted was actually Alexander himself, even though it is believed that it was Hercules, not Alexander. In the mind of his contemporaries and later people, I believe it was always Alexander that people looked at on those coins. Whether it is lion skin or elephant skin, people knew it was Alexander. But this coin simply tells us, reaffirms the fact that it was actually Alexander himself depicted on the coin. Now, what links this coin to the Decadrachms that we just saw in the previous slide is the lettering. There's most likely, this was an AB monogram and the X letter there. And apparently this coin was at some point in the collection of collector in Pakistan. And this should be the person holding the coin in his hand. But his latest whereabouts is unknown. Here I have, I wanted to show you the whole denominations of coins Alexander issued at his time. Despite the vast metal resources he had at his disposal, the smaller denominations are extremely rare. Obviously, they were not used very commonly. Of course, gold is rare, and that's why we don't see many of them yet. They are abundantly available at museum collections and private collections. Decadrachms, we can really count how many available, or we can roughly estimate that there can be 50 to 70 of them are known. And tetradrachms, countless. D-drums, very rare. Drums, countless of them are available. And all the other smaller denominations are extremely rare, except for the bronzes. Of course, they are quite common. So that tells us that, in my mind at least, and confirms my theory that these are the results of inflationists' policies. There was too much money, and the prices of goods and services simply went sky high, and they could only be afforded by large denominations. And when money dried up, smaller denominations simply disappeared. The larger denominations continued for a while, and then people simply went back to barter. When Alexander died, unfortunately, he didn't have any trustworthy person that he could hand over, or he didn't expect to die, of course, but at his last breath, it is said that he told Perdiccas, his friend and general, to simply give the power, the throne, to the most worthy person, the strongest person. Of course, all his generals thought that they were the strongest, but they couldn't agree on anyone. And the discussion or the initial fight could only be prevented by agreeing to simply give the throne to the feeble-minded younger brother of Alexander, Philip III, and under the watchful eyes of regent until his pregnant wife would give birth to, hopefully, a boy. And that simply settled the discussions, the initial discussions, and Philip III became the king. And of course, coins started to appear in his name. But we have to emphasize the fact that many mints continued producing coins with Alexander's name at the same time. In fact, it wouldn't be a mistake to theorize that more coins were minted in the name of Alexander with Alexander's name than Philip's name. I think it was just a practice for them to mint coins in the name of Philip rather than as a real sovereign reign of Philip. So this is the area that we were talking about that became rightfully a source of conflict for many generals. And the famous Diadochoi wars started. So Cassander in Macedonia, Lysimachus in Thrace, Antigonus in Phrygia, and Seleucus in Babylonia, and Ptolemy in Egypt. They simply divided the land as administrators first. But everybody knew that the other one was eyeing to take the sole power. And of course, conflicts start to emerge from every corner. Antigonus, one of Ptolemais, the one-eyed, was the most experienced and the strongest of all the diadochi. His experience in warfare and administration proved very efficient at the beginning. And from Phrygia, because he was left in Phrygia during the early period of the Alexander campaigns, and he was controlling the communication and money transfers between Macedonia and wherever Alexander went. So he had established himself very well in that region, and it's a wealthy region too, substantially wealthy region in terms of commerce. And he simply established himself in his realm, and then started campaigning to the north and south and east. And he was quite successful, partly thanks to the able son he produced, Demetrius, the Polyarchetes. He was helping his father in his campaigns. Interestingly, Antigonus never minted coins in his name. He simply continued using Alexander's coins with certain monograms that simply tell us that they were minted by Antigonus. Otherwise, we don't know. But his son, Demetrius, most likely after his father's death, started minting coins with his own image on the obverse and his own reverse designs, because he was a naval officer and commander, and he was a very, very successful naval commander. So his chief deity is Poseidon. And so he minted a lot of coins with Poseidon designs. Cassander, interestingly, never minted silver coins or gold coins in his name, but only bronze coins. So this is really curious. He is a very controversial figure. His father didn't favor him. He was simply left behind, but he persevered. He fought, and he managed to get a hold of the power, and finally killing Alexander's heirs. He simply declared himself king. Yet, interestingly, he doesn't have any silver coins in his name. It's not that, he didn't know, but I guess he simply thought that he could use the silver coinage of Alexander at the same time. He only produced bronze coins. That said, as a numismatist and historian, I will not be surprised if one day they find some silver coins with the name Cassander as the king appears on coin. So never say never, or never say this is the first, or never say this is the last when it comes to researches in ancient numismatics. By the way, going back to Antigonus, the most remarkable thing he did was actually declaring himself a king in 306. Until that time, none of the generals dared to declare themselves a king. And Antigonus simply decided to do that. And guess what? Right after he proclaimed himself king, all the others proclaimed themselves king. Lysimachus was a bodyguard of Alexander. After Alexander's death, he was the governor of the Thrace region. And right after Antigonus, he declared himself king. And like all the other generals, when their interests when their interests came together, they worked together, and then as soon as they achieved their goals, they started to fight against one another. So he joined Lysimachus, Ptolemy, and Seleucus to defeat Antigonus, and then as soon as they defeat Antigonus, they start to pick on one another. The coinage of Lysimachus is very remarkable artistically, I should say, and he continued using, of course, and minting coins with Alexander's name, but later on, after declaring himself king, he started to use his own titles and names on his coins. The Alexander types continued to be used, and then he introduced some artistically extraordinary designs with the likeness of Alexander on the obverse and a seated Athena on the reverse. Many of these coins were produced by very, very skillful coin die engravers, obviously. Yes, I chose some really nice ones here, but even the crudest ones look nice as they were produced by some very skillful artists. The Seleucid kingdom lasted almost 300 years, and it produced so many sovereigns. Here is a list of all the people somehow engaged in the Seleucid kingdom. Not exactly, maybe some of them are Seleucid, but they were part of that kingdom one way or another. The founder of the dynasty is Seleucus I, also known as Nicator, victorious. He was a very successful general during the eastern campaigns of Alexander. He again continued to be a general after Alexander's death, and under Perdiccas for a while. And 305 or 4, he proclaimed himself king because he was left in the east, Mesopotamia, and further east. So a huge, politically and economically rich area. So he proclaimed himself king, and then he started minting coins in his name, as well as using coins in the name of Alexander. What is interesting about Seleucus I is that he introduced some new types, especially the one that was minted in Susa in Persia, showing Alexander wearing some kind of a helmet covered with panther skin and horns of bull. And on the reverse, he has a Nike standing crowning a trophy. A very different design from all the others. And from the beginning, we see their badge, their symbol, an anchor in the field. So when we see Alexander name and anchor, we simply attribute those coins to the Seleucid kingdom. Like Alexander, he introduced some smaller denominations. It's obvious. It has to be done. It's not an innovation, but any kingdom, any power needs to provide for commercial needs of his country. So he introduced some smaller denominations, as well as some bronze coins at that time. Now I would like to insert this soap opera type of story here. Seleucus I reigned with his son, and early on he proclaimed him a joint king, and he simply gave the eastern provinces to his administration. But apparently he was in love with his stepmother, and some dramatic literary sources explain that Antiochus was sick from love, and finally his father, discovering that, said, "Okay, so be it. You can have the wife." And so Stratonice was given to Antiochus, and this story was painted by Jacques-Louis David in 1700s. Antiochus I and Stratonice. Antiochus is lying in his sickbed, and the king, Seleucus I, is bringing the woman that he's in love with to help his son recover. Of course, it's just a story, but we don't know how true that story is. Antiochus later on developed his own indigenous designs of coins. And one of the most remarkable designs comes from Magnesia at Spilum. On the obverse is the head of the king, and on the reverse, for the first time in the Seleucid kingdom, naked Hercules or Heracles, seated on rock covered with lion skin, holding a club. But more famously, he introduced the Apollo seated on amphilos types. And this was used for quite a long time, alongside the Zeus, seated Zeus types during his reign. And as I mentioned earlier, he designed a coin to commemorate his father. The amphilos story is interesting. Very quickly, they wanted to know where the center of the world, so they sent, Zeus sends two eagles, one to the east, one to the west, and the point that they met was supposed to be the center of the world, and that happened to be Delphi, and Amphilos simply designated that spot. And of course, it's a dynasty, we said. Other kings followed. I'm not going to talk about all of these dynasts, but they all introduced some interesting coins to study. Antiochus III, also known as the Great, was a remarkable king and an army commander. He was very young when he ascended the throne. His traditional designation, the Great, stems from a misunderstanding. He simply took the traditional title of the Persian kings, but then everybody started to call him Great. But after restoring Asia and the wars with diadochs. He successfully campaigned in the east, so accumulated quite a big wealth during his campaigns, and he felt the courage to take over the Alexander's position. And his campaigns at the beginning were very successful. He went to west, invaded Thrace. At the same time, he accepted fugitive Hannibal to his court. And Hannibal became a commander of his naval force for a while. But unfortunately, he stumbled upon a tough opponent when the Macedonian people asked for help from the Roman Republic at that time. So he was first defeated at Thermopylae and then at Magnesia's Spilum in 190 BC. So he had to abandon all the country north of Taurus Mountains, basically Cilicia in southern Anatolia and Syria were under his kingdom. He lost almost all of the rest of Asia at that time, Anatolia. This is a very, very remarkable time in the history of Anatolia. Many cities that Antiochus abandoned, Romans didn't know what to do with them, and they simply set them free. It's hard to believe, but for a while they were left on their own, and some of the most beautiful, some of the nicest coins were produced during that time. We're going to see shortly. At that time, this usurper came up when Seleucus III was assassinated while campaigning in Asia. The troops acclaimed Archelaus, this general apparently, otherwise not known king, but he refused the crown and executed the plotters and sent the army back to Antiochia. He was rewarded for his loyalty by the king. Antiochus III appointed the governor of Seleucid Asia, and he swiftly recovered much of the territory recently lost to Pergamon. So he was doing very well, but in 220, for whatever reason, he decided that he was a better choice for the throne, and he declared himself king. However, he was not very successful in his upheaval, and he was captured and punished very harshly, and he was flayed alive and beheaded and impaled. However, this very rare, apparently only one known, unique coin, we know this usurper. Antiochus IV Epiphanes is important, I said. He was sent to Rome as a ransom, and when his brother died, he was sent back to Syria to take the Syrian or Seleucid throne, and he brought with him a lot of new ideas. Apparently, he studied, learned a lot while he was in Rome, and he was an extraordinary visionary. And he brought some new ideas to the Syrian or the Seleucid court. And his coinage is remarkable in many different ways. As I explained at the beginning of my talk, he introduced two types, two items. One, the radiate heads, so he claimed he was a god. And then he put those titles that he adopted on his coinage for the first time. And especially for local numismatic legacy, he gave authority to certain cities to mint coins in their name for the first time. So he helped certain numismatic legacies emerge within the lands that he dominated. And the last person that I want to talk about, the Seleucid dynasty, is Cleopatra of Syria. Actually, he was the daughter of Ptolemaic VI of Egypt. She married 3 Seleucid kings, one after another, not all of them together, of course. And it is said that she gave birth to 8 children by all of those kings. He killed one of the sons, not to share the throne with. And for a while, she reigned on her own. And while his son, Antiochus VIII, Grypus, the hook nose, grew up. But it was mostly, in name, she was the ruler. Such an ambitious woman. She always put herself in the first place on the coins. And the son, Grypus, was growing wild and difficult to control for her. So she decided to eliminate Antiochus. And after returning from a hunt, she offered him a cup of wine. But Grypus simply suspected that this was not natural for her to do. So he forced her to drink that wine, which simply ended her life. So, those movie producers go about and invent stories like Lord of Rings and this and that. Here is an extraordinary story for anyone to make a movie. Look at this woman's life, full of drama, power, ambition, wars, and all kinds of plots, and a striking end to her life too. And here is the list of the Ptolemaic kings. Another remarkable dynasty dominated Egypt, but not only Egypt. They simply were strong game players in the Eastern Mediterranean. They managed to control the southern shores of Anatolia, certain parts of Greece, and at times they invaded a greater portion of Syria, and they produced some interesting coinage that was different from the rest of the other Alexander generals. Ptolemy I, Soter, savior, was a Macedonian general, and he took Egypt early on as part of his governing area, and then he established himself as king. If we are supposed to believe in ancient gossips, he might even be a half brother of Alexander the Great, because his mother and Philip II, Alexander's father, had an affair. But we will never know that, of course. Yet, he was very fond of Alexander, and apparently Alexander was very fond of him too. And he managed to seize Alexander's body on the way to Macedon, and he took it to Egypt, and then it remained there, most likely. It is said that he wrote the first history of Alexander's life, which is lost now. However, it's true that he founded the famous library in Alexandria. It might be an exaggeration, but ancient sources say that there were at least 500,000 volumes. So we are talking about scrolls, long and short, in that museum. But for many years, some very famous scholars studied at that library, and they produced very important scholarship. The coinage is, of course, dull, other than the early issues. This is the one that I mentioned earlier. Alexander deified Alexander's head wearing elephant skin, and on the reverse is a remarkable figure of Athena preparing to strike a thunderbolt. And in front of her is the main attribute of the Ptolemaic coins, an eagle. And from Ptolemy on, the main reverse topic will be an eagle perching on thunderbolt, and mostly showing respect to the founder of the dynasty. The followers of Ptolemy continued using the image of Ptolemy I on the reverse, on the obverses of their coins. From the beginning, Ptolemy's coins were minted in the Attic standard, 17.2030. This one is a heavy gold, but the others were in the standard weight. But Ptolemy didn't have access to rich silver mines. He had access to gold mines in Sudan. So he was getting a lot of gold, and bronze was coming from Cyprus, or copper, I should say, and all the other metals coming from other parts of the kingdom. But he didn't have access to any silver mines. So from early on, he reduced the weight of his silver coinage, and it went down to 17.5 to 14.5 at times. Ptolemy II, Philadelphus, the one who loves his father, followed his father. His coinage is rather dull. Again, the head of his father on the obverse, and on the reverse, the famous Ptolemaic eagle. But for the first time, we see a wife as a coin regent, or joint sovereign on the coin, and with her own name, and Arsinois Philadelphoi, Arsinois, who loves her brother. And on a gold coin, he simply put his likeness and his wife on the obverse, and on the reverse, his father and his mother. Interestingly, he thought that he needed to identify the figures. Here, Theon, the gods, and here, siblings, Adelphon. And during this time, we start to see large bronze coins, very impressive large bronze coins. That simply tells us that he had access to bronze, and he could produce more bronze coins than others. And these central depressions we start to see in this period. Ptolemy V Epiphanes is interesting because during his time they produced the so-called Rosetta Stone. It's a decree. It's a governmental decree that establishes Ptolemy V as the king. He was very young when his father died. And he was ascended to the throne at the age of 5, but he ruled under a series of regents. And when he was only 12, he was proclaimed king, and that had to be declared. And they needed the support of the clergy, the priests, to accept him as a king. So this was simply proclaimed on a stone in 3 different alphabets. So this tells us something about the languages spoken in Egypt at that time. The Greek is the last one. On the top, you have a Demotic script, and then, on the top is the hieroglyphics, and in the middle is the Demotic script, and then finally the Greek script. The last person that I would like to talk about in the Ptolemaic dynasty is Cleopatra VII. For many years, in our generation at least, Elizabeth Taylor was the image of Cleopatra VII for us. And when you look at this bust or head from Germany, from the Antike Sammlung Museum, she doesn't look so bad, but her coins they don't show a very remarkably pretty woman, and especially this one, the bronze coin. I would say she had the power to influence the die engravers, so she could simply order them to idealize her likeness, but apparently she didn't care, and I cannot imagine that she didn't see when they designed these coins. But when you look at this bust, it is the similarity is quite staggering. And on this coin, I will say that the coin designers simply, or coin engravers simply didn't know what the queen looked like, and the sovereign at that time, Mark Antony, looked like. Look at the noses. They simply designed them without really knowing who they were drawing on the dies. So I will not take these as likenesses of the Roman ruler and the Egyptian ruler, but just certain figures that the die engraver simply created from imagination, and he didn't do a good job, even though they are extremely rare and considered a novelty among numismatists and historians. We should also talk about some smaller kingdoms that emerged among the Diadochi at that time, and Pergamon Kingdom is one of the most remarkable ones. In terms of numismatic legacy, they produce some very interesting coins. But the beginning, the story is really interesting. Philotaros was a eunuch, and he served first under Antigonus, and then he switched his allegiance to Lysimachus, and then he simply worked with Seleucus. Long story short, he inherited a large treasure that he was entrusted by Seleucus when he died in 281. He didn't give the money back, apparently, and he simply took control of the money and used it wisely in his way to create a land of influence for himself. He didn't declare himself a king, but he was just a ruler of a certain geography, and he used the money wisely, as I said, to build a very, very remarkable city and kingdom. During his nearly 40 years of rule, he constructed the Acropolis of Pergamon, 2 temples at least, Temple of Demeter and Temple of Athena, and the Pergamon's first palace at that time. Evmenes I, Antiochus I and Evmenes II, those are the followers of Philotaros. They all continued minting coins using the design that the founder of the dynasty started with his name. And interestingly, on this coin of Antiochus I, Athena is crowning the name of Philotaros. I think that's a brilliant iconography on the side of the coin designer. And Evmenes II, for the first time, uses his own likeness on the obverse of his coins, while continuing to use the head of the founder of the dynasty. And during the time of Antiochus, they start using these cystophoric or chistophoric denomination that became the main means of exchange in Western Anatolia at that time. We need to talk about the Pontic Kingdom as well. The Mithridatic dynasty was established shortly after 302 BC by Mithridates I, the Kitestes, the founder, son of a Persian ruler in the service of Antigonus. He claimed descent from Darius I of Persia. Henceforth, the kingdom of Pontus was ruled by a succession of kings, mostly bearing the same name, until 64 BC. Early kings don't seem to have issued coinage, but starting with Mithridates III, whose coinage is quite rare though, they start to produce coins. And a couple years ago, this interesting coin appeared on the market, and the legend says that it is Basileus Laodicus Epiphanos Kai Philadelphoi. So it is a queen, Epiphanes Philadelphos, wife of Mithridates IV. There was a discussion at some point that this coin might be a forgery, which still continues. There are certain people who believe that it is not an authentic coin, but others continue claiming that it is authentic. So it was sold for an enormous amount of money at that time. I guess those who invested in this coin don't want to lose their money, so they continue producing articles about its authenticity. The most remarkable personage in this dynasty is, of course, Mithridates the sixth, the Epator, the one who lost his father, or the one with a noble father. Another extraordinary story for movie makers. His life is full of adventures. He was very persistent in his ambitious goals, and he achieved many of them. And he lived a very, very long life. And whoever is bored from reading whatever they are reading, I recommend that you read about Mithridates the sixth, and I guarantee you will not feel bored in any stage of his life. Full of adventures, and also you see his idealistic ambitions on his coinage. No emperor nor king was depicted on the coinage in such an artistic way, other than Mithridates the sixth. We have to look into the Bithynian Kingdom as well. They are not very well known, other than among the numismatists. They are very well known, of course, but otherwise people don't talk about the Bithynian kings, but they produced quite many artistically beautiful coins, and we have a lot to learn from their numismatic legacy. According to Herodotus, the Bithynians came from Thrace, but actually excavations prove that there were settlers long before the immigration from Thrace. After Lydian and Persian dominion, they gained independence after Alexander's conquest of Asia, and then established a dynasty. I guess Bas and Zipoitas were the early kings, and then Nicomedes the first founded Nicomedia, and it became a very prominent and prosperous kingdom. And then his successors, Prusias I, Prusias II, and Nicomedes II. By the way, these are all cities in Western Anatolia, and their names continue living. Prusias gave his name to the city Bursa, and Nicomedes gave his name to Nicomedia, Iznik, right now in northwestern Anatolia. And they produced many coins. Unfortunately, they were not able to cope with Mithridates the sixth, and they were defeated by him, and then they, of course, Roman Senate came to their help, and finally the last king bequeathed the kingdom to the Roman Republic this is a practice that was first done by the Pergamon Kingdom. So a second kingdom voluntarily joined the Roman Republic in Anatolia. Cappadocian Kingdom was important in central Anatolia. I believe many of them didn't speak Greek at all, but because they were mostly Persian descents of noble people who declared themselves king after a while. Ariarathes I was the earliest sovereign, established himself as the king of Cappadocia, and he knew the strength of Alexander. He simply said, "No problem, I am at your service, I'll pay tribute." And Alexander didn't bother to invade Cappadocia, but he was killed during the fight between among the Diadochs, and his son Ariarathes II recovered the inheritance, and then a series of successors simply took over. Ariobarzanes is an interesting personage here. He was not part of the lineage, but he was chosen as an administrator. He was a rather old guy, I believe, when he was put on the throne, and he simply identifies himself as Philoromaios, so Roman lover or friend of Rome. But they produced very interesting series of coins, mostly in similar forms. Athena on the reverse, and the titles of the kings surrounding Athena. Parthian kingdom must not be overlooked in this area. During this period, they produced a wealth of coins, each king in the same style as the other Hellenistic kings, with very interesting titles, similar to those of the Seleucid kings adopted, but the most remarkable one is the Philhellenos, the Hellen lover. So Parthians were not always in conflict with the Western world, as many people think. There were the times that they were friends, and they even declared that on their coins. And finally, the Bactrian Kingdom. When the Seleucids lost their they also lost their power in the east, and that helped the Bactrian Kingdom to flourish. And together with Diodotus, the satrap of Bactria, they declared their independence, and then a series of successors maintained themselves as the king of Bactria, and they produced incredibly interesting and beautiful coins with Greek titles, yet you can appreciate the fact that no one other than the ruling class could speak Greek at that time. Alexander the Great commemorative issues continued to be minted mostly in Western Anatolia and Syria during the 2nd century and 1st century, 2nd century BC, I should say. The 3rd century they start, but then they become more popular in the 2nd century BC. It is mostly because these were very trusted coins, and many cities simply continued minting these types as part of their financial endeavors. By the way, minting coins also was a good business enterprise. It could make money from selling minted metal. The 2nd century BC new style owls should be mentioned because they are also part of the Hellenistic numismatic legacy, and they're all the same types. On the obverse is the head of Athena, and on the reverse is an owl standing on an amphora, and then you have countless side figures. And of course, the names of certain citizens or moneyers who presided over the minting of these coins. Many names, it's incredible. This one you see an elephant. Here is Nike driving a quadriga. Here you have Demeter standing facing, holding 2 torches. Here is the headdress of Isis. 4-part of lion, and here is just the names of certain people, and finally an anchor and a Triptolemus riding a chariot drawn by serpents. I mean, this is an incredible story here. It's just a side figure that they put right here. And here you have Asclepius, god of medicine. Here you have a Pegasus, and here it's a Gorgon's head, and here is a dolphin in trident and a double cornucopia. This is not all. There are many other types that you can see on these series of coins. And I think these are the most interesting coins in my view, as they are the issues of independent cities after the defeat of Antiochus III, when Romans simply didn't know, they didn't have the means to control, to rule Western Anatolia. They simply set those cities free, and they enjoyed a short time of independence, and they produced some of the most beautiful, artistically beautiful coins at that time. Here is a coin of Smyrna, modern Izmir, and Myrina, and Aigai in Aeolis, and Kyme in that region, and more of them, Magnesia ad Mandrum, Alabanda, Alexandria Troas, Miletos, and every now and then we come across coins like this one from Mytilene on the Lesbos, civic coin from the same time period. It's the only one known type. And it continues in other places, Heraclea Latmon, Lebedos in Greece, Tenedos in North Aegean Sea, Ilion, famous Troy, and Abydos, Lampsakos, Kyzikos, and Side in the south. And many of these cities, including Macedon under the rule of the Roman Republic, minted coins in the same denomination. And they are extremely beautiful, artistically beautiful coins with rich history. There is a lot to read about this period. I have a list of books that I read and enjoyed and learned from. I have 3 ancient authors. There are more, of course, but I have 3 of these here. Newell is the first who did the most extensive research on the coinage of Seleucid mints. He published 2 volumes, Eastern Seleucid mints and Western Seleucid mints. Otto Markholm has a very interesting book to read. Martin Price, of course, his book is considered the main resource for Alexandrian types. Arthur Houghton collected and published a lot about Seleucid kings and other coins. And you can find interesting information in other books. And I'm sure there are many others. These are just the books that I had access to and learned from. So I can recommend them. Yeah, I think this is all I wanted to talk about the Hellenistic period. And hopefully next time we will be talking about the Roman period. In the meantime, if you have any questions, I will be happy to try to answer.